Alrighty, now it's time to listen to Brett Cooper be the DEI understander for us. Are you excited? Because I'm not.
What happened to the men? How did they get so radical? Why are all of the men so right-wing? Well, DEI happened, and
Ma'am, I don't think there's actually been an uptick in right-wingers, have there? Hold on, I need to look at some data real quick. One sec. Alrighty, so party affiliation of Americans by year. 30%, like 28 to 30%, versus the Democrats' 28 to 34%. Like, the Democrat percentages have been going down. They were steadily high. Nope, they were actually about as high as the Republican numbers when they were there. So by year, the numbers look the fucking same. Okay. I wonder if there's any information that we can find on amount of men who vote Republican, because that's going to be the closest we can get to a data point. All right, so according to Pew Research Center, amongst all, let's put that over there real quick, amongst all registered voters, men tilt the GOP, with 52% of men identifying with or leaning towards the Republican Party, with 46% leaning towards the Democratic Party. Okay. That's a handful of percentages. That's not a number that I care about. So what is this? What happened to all the men, Brett? Because for a statement like that, you need to have hard numbers, and I don't think she's ever going to actually show us those.
Jacob Savage is here to prove it. So earlier this week, on December 15th, Compact Magazine and Jacob Savage had the balls to go where very few other publications have gone, and they released a scathing expose on the realities of DEI, and more specifically, the impact that they had on white men. The article is titled The Lost Generation, and again, it's written by an author named Jacob Savage, and his post on X sharing this article now has over 9 million impressions. People are now calling this article one of the most important pieces of political journalism ever. And it brings to light one of—
Who is saying that? Drew Dave says, check your outbound image. What do you mean? We gotta skip the navigation?
of the most talked about issues.
What the fuck are you talking about? OBS? Oh, wait, what? What is this skip navigation? What is this? What the hell? When did that get there? Let me see what it's from. What is that? Why is that there? Okay, bye. When you want to look for the source of her claim. I thought it was an intentional editor's note. No, I don't know what the fuck that was.
In modern culture and modern politics. What happened to the men? Now, before we dive into this and talk about the article, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to the channel if you—
Or instead, you could maybe do the same thing for me because you're watching over on my channel. That would be really cool. My name is Suris. If you don't know who I am, I try to cover politics in a somewhat fair and reasonable fashion, and I also try to make it a little more fun and a little less miserable. If that is your bag, then maybe consider subscribing to my channel and also letting a couple friends know what I'm doing over here. There, now I can breathe again. Back to you, Brett.
If not already, and of course, ring that notification bell to make sure that you never miss one of our uploads. All right, so this is not Jacob's first time writing on this topic, talking about white men and DEI. Over the summer, he actually had another article go viral. It was titled The Vanishing White Male Writer. And this topic is very personal to Jacob Savage because he was once—
Why is whiteness so personal to you? I'm just curious, what kind of person is it, like, what kind of person is so, like, sorry, brain, to what kind of person is whiteness that fucking important? Who?
An aspiring screenwriter who was forced out of his dreams due to the implications from DEI, specifically because his white skin tone. In this article, he wrote, "The door—"
I do not think that you were unable to be a screenwriter because you are white. Who the fuck is this man? Hold on. Who did she say this man was?
calling this article one of the most important pieces of political journalism ever. And it brings to light one of the most talked about issues in modern culture and modern politics. What happened to the men? Now, before we dive into this and talk about the article, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And of course, ring that notification bell to make sure that you never miss one of our uploads. All right, so this is not Jacob's first time writing on this topic, talking about white men and DEI. People are now calling this article and his post on a scathing expose on the realities of DEI, and more specifically, the impact that they had on white men. The article is titled The Lost Generation, and again, it's
Jacob Savage. Okay, it's from Jacob Savage. I guess we're doing a wee bit of research real quick. Who is this motherfucker? Guys, it's being shared by Chris Rufo. I hate everything about this now. I hate everything about this. Okay. Chris Rufy's, go figure. Yup. He has shit in Reason magazine called "Was There a Woke War on White Millennial Men?" What? Okay. I don't think I can trust a word that comes out of this dumb fucker's mouth, but sure, Brett. Sure, Brett. What do you have to say about it? Give me a reason to care.
Of lower-level TV writers. By 2024, they accounted for just 11.9%. The Atlantic's editorial staff went from 53% male and 89% white in 2013 to 36% male and 66% white in 2024. White men fell from...
Oh no! There's fewer white male people in the position of power. Oh no! There's more women now! That's bad for some reason. I'm supposed to tell you that's bad. I don't know why that's bad. I don't know why that fucking matters. But it apparently is both bad and also matters. Did you know that?
39% of tenure track positions in the humanities department at Harvard to 18% in 2023. In retrospect, 2014 was the hinge, the year that DEI became institutionalized across American life. Industry after industry, gatekeepers were promised extra consideration to anyone who wasn't a white man, and then they provided just that. And thinking about Hollywood and his dreams of being a screenwriter, he was not wrong, because even back in 2014, like, Hollywood was the belly of the beast. I don't think I really noticed this or it impacted me until, Trump's first term, I would say, like, around 2016, but it became routine. And you guys know, I was a child actor, that's what I did when I was younger, but it was routine that every single breakdown I would get for an audition, no matter what the project was, it would have some line saying, we're seeking an ethnically ambiguous actor. And they would list off the ideal races for the certain role. And then at the end, they would kind of be like, oh, and yeah, if you're white, I guess you can audition. But like, don't get your hopes up was basically the sentiment that was given to us. Like,
yeah, if you have somebody who's supposed to be ethnically, like, ambiguous, then you want somebody who's mixed race. Like, that's a, like, who cares? Like, I'm trying to figure out why this part matters and to whom. Like, I don't know. There's a certain kind of person that is so obsessed with the whiteness of Hollywood or the whiteness of anything. And I feel like that's a kind of person I don't want talking to my kids when I have them.
it even became a running joke, a non-political joke with even my left-wing high school friends, that we would go out for roles, we would get callbacks, we would go to director sessions, we'd even get pinned, and then, oh, somebody diverse got the role. Like, it was just so expected. And 10 years later, it's only gotten more blatant. For example, comedian Tyler Fisher went public with the story of how an agent decided that they could not rep him because he was a straight white male. Listen to this.
This has been happening for about 10 years. Every once in a while, a casting director would say, hey, you know, I want to submit you for this job, but we're not really doing the white guy thing right now. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And it happened more and more frequently. And then this agent that I am suing, or manager rather, reached out and said, we love you. We want to get you auditions for Curb.
You're suing your agent because they didn't want to rep you? That feels weird.
Enthusiasm, all this stuff. And said, great. A few months later, they reach out, said, we want to get you on the phone. So I'm sitting there like, all right, here we go. Finally, it's all happening. And he goes, we hit a snag. We really love you. We think you're a star, but we're not taking white guys. And I was just like, what the you know, been at this for 15 years. Not that I deserve anything, you know? If I went my whole career without getting booked on something, but I at least had the opportunity to audition, I'd feel okay about that.
And that's the key point.
Would you, though? Would you feel better about that? Would you not feel like you wasted your time? I don't know. I feel like that's been my problem. So, like, for those of you who don't know, I do voice acting on the side. I've been in a couple of projects. I've been in a video game, City of Overton. I've been in a couple of fan projects. Nothing major, nothing big, but like there are some accolades that I have. They are small, but they are things that I am proud of nonetheless. I'm going to be honest. I feel like the most disheartening thing is doing audition after audition after audition, or submitting your audition and not getting a callback. I feel like spending the time, damn near wasting the time on trying to do that. That's the part that gets me the most. When I feel like I have very limited time to begin with, and I feel like I'm spending that time in a wasted fashion, I'm not super chill with that. I do not like that. But that is a reality you have to accept when you are trying to audition for those kinds of jobs. Cyberchill says, I mean, I heavily doubt that actually say that. They do a bit more Weasley to cover their asses. Maybe. Maybe. Drew Dave says, does she want DEI so she can play MLK's wife?
You at least want the opportunity to get your foot in the door, to at least feel like maybe you're being considered based on merit, even if you don't get the job. If it's in Hollywood, if it's in any other industry, people are just asking for the opportunity to be considered equally. Like, I thought we cared about equality, but of course it's more about equity these days. And, you know, Tyler's story, it's not just hearsay. He actually had...
Okay, so you know why it's about equity, right? Like, you say that as if that's a bad thing, but equity is recognizing that a group of people have historically had an advantage and trying to compensate for that advantage. When you do equality instead of equity, it's the equivalent of having everybody have the same size chair to sit in, but not everybody is the same size. You don't have any way to ascertain, like, the person who can't sit up to the chair because maybe they've got a genetic condition, the person who has a thyroid problem and maybe they're not able to sit in the chair because the chair is too small. You have equality, everybody has the same chair, but you don't actually have accommodations for everybody's needs. I feel like the right in general demonizes equity, but the end result of equity is actually a good thing.
As the recording of that conversation. Listen to this.
Is it a policy, like, explicit that they're not taking on any, like, white men, or is it, like, case by case?
On-camera talent, stand-up, probably not.
Okay, so no white men are allowed for on-camera stuff.
I guess it's right now where it stands, but like, yeah, it could change in a year depending on...
Okay, so there's a bunch of information we're not getting. What kind of role was this? Did it matter that the role was a particular race or not? And why was there a race incentive in the first place? We don't have any of that information. We're given just enough information to get angry, but we are not given enough information to be correct and well-informed. We are given enough to react to, because that is Brett Cooper's game. That has been her game. That has Ben Shapiro's game. Ben Shapiro taught her this game. They give you just enough information for you to react to something and be angry, but never enough information to be fully informed.
If casting directors, that's not their feedback anymore. Or not even casting directors, you know, studios, whatever it may be, where it's like, this is what we're looking for.
So yeah, Tyler, why don't you just sit on your hands and hope that the world is going to change in a year? Now, obviously, that did not happen. Tyler recorded that.
Okay, but that's either one agent or that is one show. Nobody is saying that over, like, all of fucking Hollywood. Nobody is saying that about all of an industry. That is a situation where you have to apply more. You have to try to get other agents. There's more you have to do. And yeah, it sucks. It is I will admit this, show business, the little bit of it I've done, the tiny bit of it that I have been exposed to, it sucks. There is a lot that is asked of you, and you might not even get a paycheck at the end of the day, even after you jump through 1,000 hoops. That is what it is for a lot of people, and I fucking hate that. That's not a good thing about it, but that is its reality, and this just looks like you wrestling with the same reality that I have had to deal with. A lot of Hollywood and a lot of show business is not what you know or what credentials you have. It is who you know. It is who is willing to take you on, irrespective of what your personal talents are. It's a reason why so many agents will have you go to, like, parties. They'll have you go, like, as a part of your job, to go to a meet and greet, to go to a wine mixer. You'd go to these things because part of your job is getting in with people who can give you work. Again, should that be the reality of the situation? Absolutely fucking not. I think we can all agree that that should not be the situation. That should not be how any industry is operated at all. But that is the way that the Hollywood industry, that is the way that the showbiz industry operates. It is what was told to me by my agent when she was finding work for me. It is what I found out the hard way through friends of mine who were involved in show business, who have been involved in the Atlanta film industry. It is information that has been repeated to me by every single person who I trust with any level of expertise. This has consistently been the feedback I have gotten. It is an industry-wide problem. It is not a problem of DEI. And yet, grifters definitely want to sell you on the idea that the problem is DEI. Because it's easier for you to point to DEI as an issue. It's easier for you to point to it as a boogeyman, as a spook. It's easier for you to demonize that than it is for you to talk about the actual problems there. This is an issue that I have with a lot of conservatives. A fuck ton of conservatives. I feel like conservatives are really good at recognizing when a problem exists. And I feel like they're really bad at figuring out solutions to that problem or figuring out what the culprit to that problem is. And this has been a problem that I have seen from conservatives for as long as I have been a left-wing commentator, but I've not actually been very good at articulating that in the past. It's something that I've figured out better by sitting down and talking with conservatives over time. Because by sitting down and talking with people, you find that a lot of you actually agree on what the problems in the world are. What you disagree on are who the culprits are and what the solutions should be. There's a quote from Abigail Thorne that I want to throw at you real quick. And it's not a full quote. I don't remember the exact quote. Maybe K Fox will know the quote, but I believe it's from the Steve Bannon video. But Abigail pointed out that an anti-Semite, a conspiracy theorist, and a bog standard leftist both believe that there's a political elite that is controlling the world from the shadows. But one group says that it's multi-billionaires, and the other group says that it's people of a particular religion. One group can point to people who actually have power, and another group goes, man, those gas chambers were a really good idea. Why don't we go back to those? Conservatives can identify that a problem is there, but they are very bad at figuring out who a culprit is and what the solution should be.
Audio multiple years ago, and the situation is still the same. So the point being, it's not just Jacob who experienced this in Hollywood. It certainly wasn't just Tyler, which is why millions upon millions of men across social media feel so seen and vindicated by this article. But the thing is, it wasn't all men. It was specifically young men. And as a woman who has kind of been outside of the situation...
So it wasn't all men. It was the men who lacked impulse control, the men who lacked experience. It was the men who lacked perspective. It was the men who did not know enough about the world, but still had opinions based on their limited experiences. That's what you're telling me.
Looking in, the most interesting part of the article to me was the positioning that it was older white men who made these pledges at their companies within their industries and helped usher in DEI for everyone under them. But those men in executive positions, the older men, they did not suffer. They continued to hold their positions of power while younger white men were being erased from entry-level positions and skipped over for promotions. It was millennials.
So, question, do we actually have any data that suggests that younger white men are skipped over for promotions because people are black, like not on a case by case, but as an actual systemic thing. Let me check real quick. All right, so let's look at some data real quick. So, thanks to Donald Trump, apparently, 1 in 5 white men say DEI hurt their careers, but the majority of America seems to be reporting benefits, actually. To gain insight into how DEI programs have impacted U.S. workers in February 2025, Resume Templates surveyed 1,239 employees working for companies with a DEI program within the past year. Study highlights showed that half of Americans believe DEI actually helped their careers, while only 11% said it hurt. White men were far more likely to report negative impacts. Most workers feel that DEI bolsters inclusivity, while critics argue it leads to hiring less qualified workers. Only 1 in 3 Americans support Trump's executive order banning federal DEI programs. So, fun fact. Whenever you get into like the demonization of DEI, most of the time the rhetoric is about the person being less qualified than the white guy, but they were hired on because they were black. But the reality is white guys and black guys both had to get hired on because they were qualified. If you were not qualified, you didn't get fucking hired on, generally speaking. That didn't change anything. DEI didn't change that reality for you. And yet, people are of the opinion that, nope, the black guy got hired. They must have not earned it. Like, I'm sorry, but the reality of the situation is often that that's not the case. It said you still have to be qualified? Exactly. Which means at the end of the day, your problem is that a bunch of people were qualified. That Blood Scout Beastmaster is waiting at my fallen body. Nope. Bye. I do not like it when feign death gets resisted. That gets me killed. I do not appreciate. Thank you. Freedom Inc., thank you for the 20 bits. So the majority of beneficiaries from DEI are veterans. Yup. The reality of DEI is that it is overall more beneficial. When you are arguing against DEI, you are arguing about disabled people getting hired for jobs. You are arguing about veterans getting hired for jobs. Onyx, thank you for the 100 bits, says, did you know that it's literally impossible to say the word rough twice in a row? Yeah, no, that's a dog thing. I'm sure you'll find a dog boy on the internet somewhere who's willing to say it. But no, the statistics don't bear out that white people are losing jobs to black people en masse because of DEI, Brett. Statistics bear out that more people are generally happy with DEI in the States, even in Trump's America.
Who suffered the most? It was the older Gen Zers. It's men still coming into industries right now. And people look around at this situation, they go, oh, I can't. Why are men so radicalized? Why are they so right-wing? I mean, hello?
Marketing. It's marketing. So, Brett Cooper wants to convince you that men are radicalized to be right-wing because there is a systemic oppression towards men right now, and that systemic oppression is causing them to be more radicalized. The reality is, Democrats, by and large, abandoned young men as a voter base. They did. They focused elsewhere. And started running campaigns that made young men feel like they were idiots. The problem is not DEI. The problem is marketing. Democrats largely abandoned young men as a base, and right-wingers picked them up. That's what it is. There's not a bit of reality warping in there. It's not a DEI thing. In fact, the only DEI thing that has happened is that right-wingers found that DEI was a good marketing ploy to convince young men that Democrats were their enemies. The reality is Democrats are the lesser of the two evils, but that doesn't mean that they're not an evil in and of themselves. Again, this is a marketing thing more than anything else.
Oh, the answer is right in front of our faces. Savage wrote, but for white male millennials, DEI wasn't a gentle rebalancing. It was a profound shift in how power and prestige were distributed. Yet practically none of the thousands of articles and think pieces about diversity have considered the issue by cohort. This isn't a story about all white men. It is a story about white male millennials in professional America, about those who stayed and who mostly stayed quiet. The same identity, a decade apart, met entirely different professional fates. If you were 40 in 2014, born in 1974, beginning your career in the late 90s, you were already established. If you were 30 in 2014, you hit the wall. Because the mandates to diversify—
The wall. You hit the wall. You know, it's weird. Terms like walls and glass ceiling have classically been used to argue that women were not able to get to higher levels of corporate power. I love how the right wing grabs this language that has been universally popular and appropriates it for, well, misinformation.
Didn't fall on older white men who in many cases still wield enormous power. They landed on us. And I think this, distinguishing by cohort is so important because even as I was researching this article, I was on TikTok trying to find some clips to insert into the story, and I saw so many of these videos from,
I was researching for this article. So anyways, I was on TikTok. I know that's not what she actually meant, but that is the way that came across.
2020 and 2021, where all these people are screaming about the power of white men in the world and why we need DEI and why we need to diversify. And they're like, all of these men hold all of the wealth. These white men hold the executive positions. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Donald Trump. Like, I'm sorry, but did you forget who the billionaires are in the world? Like, that's not to say that there aren't rich people of different ethnicities, but like, did we forget the material reality that we live in right now? Is that a thing we did? Peter Thiel, yep. People are weird, man. People are weird.
A lot of them still do. But what about the normal, average white man who is just trying to get by, who is just trying to start his career, who's just trying to get his foot in the door to even—
Yeah, that's a person who I want to advocate for. I think that person got sold a lie. I think that person started turning their guns towards black people and trans women and Mexican immigrants because a dumbass in the White House who froths at the mouth over the idea of genocide decided that those were the ample targets to go for. Or rather, the Heritage Foundation decided that, and he went along with it because it's quite frankly profitable for him to do so.
Be one of those executive men. We are talking about two completely different groups. Now, from here, as he establishes this premise, Savage goes on to tell the stories of three different men across three different industries.
Ah, okay, cool. So we are doing the standard method of convincing people of bullshit. Emotional testimonials. Now, here's the trick with emotional testimonials. The information from the testimonial could be very true. It could be an accurate representation of the world through the eyes of the person the testimonial is through. However, a testimonial is not data. A testimonial is not numbers. It is a story. And a story is told for a purpose. And a testimonial story is usually told for the purpose of convincing you of a particular situation. Now, data and statistics can be manipulated as well. This is not to say they can't. But when somebody is trying to convince you of something and their method of doing so is anecdote and stories, I do not have much reason to believe that that is representative of an entire thing. Because what Brett Cooper is trying to use this to illustrate is the idea that DEI is some big problem that needs to be solved and fucks with our lives. And it does so because of insert these stories here. But insert these stories here is not enough information to go off of. It is simply testimonial. And testimonial, like I said, it is not enough. It is simply somebody saying, this was my experience. And I can accept that somebody's experience was something. As an example, let's say, for instance, let's say that somebody tells you that they encountered a trans woman on the bus. And that trans woman screamed at them and told them that you need to call them ma'am and generally made their life hell. And they took from this story, they took from this real experience that really happened, they took from this that this is what trans women do, this is who they are. You would rightfully look at them like they're fucking crazy and go, well, how did you get an entire ideology from a simple anecdote? How did you do that? How did you come to that conclusion? How could you possibly have had enough information in that one little scenario to get to that conclusion? How did you get there? And they would say, well, this is my truth. This is what I experienced. This is what really happened. And you go, no, it's not that I'm saying that didn't happen. I'm not telling you that the reality you experienced is wrong. I'm not trying to gaslight you. What I'm trying to do is ask you if you honestly believe that the limited amount of information that you have is enough to come to the conclusions you've reached. And for a lot of people, they don't know how to ascertain when they've experienced enough of something to find a general trend. They'll just experience it once and then go, oh, that experience must be representative of the general population.
Who all suffered the same fate. Now, the first one that he brings up is Andrew, a journalist who was pushed out of the editorial world by executives with DEI agendas. He wrote, suddenly in Andrew's newsroom, everything was driven by identity. There were endless diversity trainings, a racial climate assessment, and at one point, reporters were told that they had to catalog in minute detail.
So, first of all, that's minute detail. Secondly, what you're describing is, well, corporate overreach. More than anything. Now, the motivating factor may be DEI, just like the motivating factor for trying to defend the trans women on the bus could be inclusivity. It does not mean that the motivating factor is wrong. The execution of that motivating factor can be very wrong. Person yells on bus, no news coverage, but when the person is trans, it gets put on Fox.
The identity characteristics of all of their sources. Andrew had been instrumental in forming the union at his company and objected when negotiations shifted from severance pay and parental leave to demands for racial quotas. They wanted to do like emergency hires of Black people, he said. And this line about emergency hires makes me laugh because obviously I have a different experience, but I remember sitting in my office in 2020 when I was an intern at a production company, which was, a serious Oscar-winning production company. This was like a real company. And I've said it before in different interviews and videos, but my job went from, as an intern, read these scripts and pass along the ones with the best characters, the best stories, to a literal racial fire drill. I mean, they were losing their minds. They were like, we don't have enough Black stories. You need to find us an Indigenous movie with a strong female lead. I was like, okay, well, does it matter if the script's good? No, we just need to have these characters. Like, it happened over.
Yeah, I don't disagree that happens. People overcorrect all the time, but that's not a problem of DEI. That's a problem of people having a flawed execution. The issue is not wanting diversity. The issue is a flawed execution in trying to achieve it.
Overnight. And it was so disgusting and so disheartening to me because it was so blatantly an attempt to appease a political mob versus trying to make good art, versus trying to tell stories that impact people and make them better. It was simply just trying to check a box to make people happy.
And you know what? To Brett Cooper's point, we actually do that in Hollywood. Not we, because I'm not part of fucking Hollywood, but that is a problem that Hollywood has had. I do not disagree with that. So I'm very bad with actors' names, but the actor who played Finn in Star Wars, this was a criticism that he levied at Disney. That Disney did the same thing. They basically abandoned a lot of what could have been his story because as far as they were concerned, they checked the box. They checked the box of having a Black actor in a lead role, and that was all that mattered. The actual substance of the story that he populated with himself and his acting did not matter. So much so, what mattered most was that Disney checked the box. That is not a problem of DEI, however. That is a problem of a corporation trying to artificially say they are inclusive, but DEI, the actual initiative of diversity, equity, and inclusion, is not doing that. Cleric says, I was looking forward to him being a Force-sensitive and trained, perhaps even alongside others. I didn't need Finn to be trained. I like Finn being a non-Force-sensitive. I don't hate the idea of him being a non-Force-sensitive at all. But the fact that his character is just the other half of Han Solo, like Poe Dameron and Finn are just Han Solo split in two. Robert said, I wanted Finn to be a Jedi. I think a lot of people wanted Finn to be a Jedi. I did not care one way or another if he was a Jedi. I just cared that his story was not constantly trying to run away in movie 2, even though he did a bunch of that in movie 1, and I thought he got over it. But, I don't know, gripes about the Star Wars movies are their own thing. They are their own thing, and that's probably a conversation for a different video. I want to do a video called Defending The Last Jedi, and also Defending Rise of Skywalker, because I genuinely think both of those movies are better than what people make them out to be. So what Brett Cooper wants to convince you of is that DEI is taking unqualified black people, or in her examples, unqualified black work or black stories, and throwing them to the forefront and throwing away white written or, white stories in general because they'd rather have the black ones. That's not DEI. DEI says everything still needs to be good. Everyone still needs to be qualified. We still need to have all the previous standards that were in place. But we need to give a little bit of assistance to the people who classically were not represented. That's what DEI does. Now, granted, I may be incorrectly articulating that. There may be aspects of it that I am getting wrong, but I think I'm more accurate than Brett is, personally. Let me stealth my elf over here real quick. You've heard of elf on a shelf. Now it's elf on a stealth. Because I want to pull up this real quick. Let's debunk some common myths about diversity and equity inclusion. This is in financial services. There's a lot of noise surrounding DEI. Some of it's constructive, much of it's misinformed. Okay, well, what's your perspective on this? Because I want to look into this a little bit, see what conversation is happening around DEI in other areas besides Brett's propaganda. At its core, DEI is a broad philosophy grounded in the simple truth that we are human, that shared humanity should be acknowledged, honored, and leveraged for the common good. It's not some niche ideology. It's a framework for making workplaces, schools, and communities more inclusive and more just. And it's not just about race. In fact, white women have been among the greatest beneficiaries of DEI efforts. So have individuals with disabilities. So have religious minorities. So have members of the LGBTQ community. Hey, you know who else has been? The fucking veterans. Disabled veterans have been major beneficiaries of DEI initiatives. Have you guys read those stories of disabled vets who celebrated the DEI initiatives being taken away because of Donald Trump, and then, they lost their jobs? And, it's a tragic fucking story, but it's being victims of the thing that you advocated for. DEI is not supposed to be anti-white. It's not supposed to be a threat to merit. The real issue is access. Here's the reality we don't say often enough. Intelligence is roughly equally distributed among all demographic groups, but opportunities are not. That gap between potential and opportunity is where DEI lives. It asks us to be more thoughtful about how we identify talent, support growth, and create environments where people can thrive, not just survive. This isn't about handouts. It's about fixing pipelines that were broken long before any of us arrived. So, when a talent agency is focusing exclusively on black hires, Latino hires, etc., are they doing DEI? Not exactly, but they are doing something that pretends to be in the spirit of it. They are trying to check boxes. What conservatives want to convince you of is that DEI is the checking of those boxes. But that's not what it is. But Chris Rufo's been on the parade of being anti-affirmative action, and then once he thoroughly demonized that, he was anti-CRT, which is critical race theory, and then once he demonized that, he was anti-DEI, and each and every one of them, every single one of them, boiled down to a way to say it's bad to try to have initiatives that give more opportunities to black people. That's what they all ended up boiling down to. At least all the things that Chris Rufo fought for that I've brought up, because he's also done anti-LGBTQ stuff. Dorita says not only that, but we get points when applying for most jobs that use point systems for determining hiring. Oh, so if a job says that if you tick this many boxes or you tick this many points, you're more likely to be considered for hiring. If you're a veteran or a disabled veteran, DEI basically gives you all of those points in favor of yourself. It makes it easier for you to get a job. It makes it easier for you to support yourself. It makes it easier for veterans of the United States military to support and protect their families. Are you saying that being anti-DEI is effectively being anti-veteran? Greta says, well, it's not DEI policy. It's what companies have naturally done over time. These are companies like Fortune 500 types. Gotcha. There's a part in here that goes about why DEI feels like lost to some. There's a reason DEI conversations can feel tense. When power structures shift even slightly, it can feel like a loss to those who have long benefited from the status quo. That doesn't mean progress should not happen. It means we need to acknowledge that discomfort is part of growth, and that real equity requires a willingness to share space, influence, and opportunity. If DEI feels like a threat, it's worth asking, what are we so afraid of losing and why? Yep, that's fair. Clueless Expert says, I heard about a grant given by the U.S. government to a programming language foundation which had as a condition that they couldn't do any DEI, so they had to turn down the grant. What? Storm says, my brain hears DEI and turns off because 90% of the time it feels like it's just a dog whistle. I mean, it is. It's a dog whistle to say that you're anti-black without action. Like, okay, so if you are a pundit, it is likely that it is a dog whistle for you to say so that you can be anti-black without actually being anti-black. Now, if you're a regular Joe Schmo on the street, it's not a dog whistle for you because you're just parroting what other people had said. But the fact that what other people have said seems so innocuous that you could say it flippantly, that is the power of a dog whistle. That is the power of all dog whistles, is that they make previously unthinkable words, phrases, and things seem perfectly natural and silent and plausibly deniable. Clueless Expert has a link. I need to hide my elf again for similar reasons as before. Foundation says it won't compromise policy of inclusivity, even if that cash would have really helped. The Python Software Foundation has walked away from a $1.5 million government grant, and you can blame the Trump administration's war on woke for weakening some open source security. The Programming Nonprofits Deputy Executive Director, Lauren Crary, said in a blog post today that the National Science Foundation has offered $1.5 million to address structural vulnerabilities in Python and the Python package. But the foundation became dispirited when the terms of this grant were that they should not and will not, during the terms of its financial assistance, operate any programs that advance or promote diversity, equity, or inclusion. I'm sorry, but okay. Man, fuck Trump. Fuck this man. Oh, and also fuck Brett Cooper. I think we've gotten enough out of this. I think we have. She's going to give us 3 testimonials, and those testimonials are supposed to convince us that DEI is bad, but testimonials do not have that kind of power. We believe they have that kind of power because humans are swayed by emotion and not numbers, but the reality is, irrespective of how much power those testimonials have to sway you, it doesn't mean that they are reality. It doesn't mean that they are representative of all reality. A person goes outside and gets hit by a car. You recognize that being hit by a car is a threat to your life. You choose not to go outside ever again because you might get hit by a car, despite the statistical non-likelihood that you will get hit by a car. But you were convinced cars are bad and dangerous, so you didn't go outside again. That's how these testimonials work. It's not data. It's not numbers. It's anecdote. An anecdote has way more sway over the human mind than it honestly should. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.